Alright, we've got our 2040 150. It's a conversion van, but I'm assuming the doors are the same. First thing you got to do is take this piece off. I was looking around here to see. So usually when you take doors off, they just either have things that jam into the holes, all these trim pieces just have things that either jam into a hole, or sometimes you have to lift up and out. So this one was really not wanting to come, so I was pulling, prying, trying to look around there. Eventually I got fed up and just popped it off, and yeah, it has this thing, just jams in there basically. I think I used a screwdriver, and then it pulls up from the bottom a little bit because that little tab fits into there. So anyway, just popped it, pulled it up, came off. Revealed a screw right here that goes into the door. Look for other screws. Found one down here. There was a little tab, popped it off. The screw that came out right there. Just prying around. It didn't really want to come up. Okay, where else? There's almost always a part right here. Got to pull this off. Again, this just had these things, which you can see, just jam into that guy right there. Another one like this. That guy just jams into that vertical slot right there. There was another screw, right here. So that is basically attached to the door handle, because they always make these really, anything like that or a grab bar usually has some pretty heavy duty screws in it, since it's going to be load bearing. So I think there was just one screw in there, and then I kept just I actually did pry this off, and I broke one. I heard it fall off in the door, so I was like, oh great, I broke it. I think my Mercury had ones that just pulled straight out, and it sucks because those things break off like half the time, but this one was not that way. I think a lot of Fords have the lift up and out style. Popped this thing off, and there was no obvious like on this, there was a little tab you can maybe see right there. Hey, stick a screwdriver in here, kind of inviting you to do that. On this one there was not, but there usually is. You usually do have to pop this out, and sure enough, there's a screw right there, and that was the last one. Once I did that, this was plugged in, of course. Once I did that, I kept just trying to lift up from the bottom, and then after I did that, it lifted up just fine. And I have to feed this through here. That's why I had to take this plug off. This is screwed in there, so that's real hard to take off. I had to take that plug off in order to feed this through that hole. And then the whole thing just lifts up and off if you're lucky. And so you can see they look like, there you go. They look like that. And that goes into all these little square holes around here. So anyway, lift up, pull out, if you know what I mean. Then there's a big white plastic sheeting, kind of like weather stripping. Pulled the whole thing off, unscrewed the speaker, and unhooked it. Luckily it was connected with this thing and not soldered on there. So a good way, if your window, like mine, was falling into the door, I'm going to go right now, once I verify that it is the regulator, which, obviously the motor works. I could hear it, but when it would get to the end, this is about as far as up it would go, it had a crunching sound, so it's pretty clear that the wires getting wrapped up in there and probably crunched inside the motor. But the motor still works. I'm going to go to rockauto.com. That their price on the regulator was $30, and at the local parts store it was $65. So that's a pretty good deal. Anyway, in the meantime, here's a good trick. You get your vice grips and just clamp it on there. Stick the thing all the way up, as far up as it'll go. Clamp that on there, and that way nobody will be able to get into your car. I have an apartment complex, so I don't have a garage. So you'll notice that here's the regulator. It's got this long metal thing that comes from here all the way up there. There's a track, and that's what holds that's what the glass mounts to. And then there's a wire that goes around And then there's the motor right here, which you probably can't see very good. There's the motor. And a lot of times they're held in by rivets. I don't know why they do screws at the top, rivets at the bottom, rivets on the for the motor. Sometimes there's usually 3 rivets for the motor. Sometimes you only have to take 2 of them. But really the easiest way, I mean, you're gonna have to drill these rivets out. They just do it because it's quicker, and you're gonna replace them. And so you're gonna have to drill these out. And the easiest way to do it is to start with a little tiny drill bit that's about the size or smaller of that little inner part, and then just keep working bigger and bigger screws, and eventually bigger and bigger bits, I mean, and eventually the thing is just gonna spin, and then you're gonna have to start kind of cranking it over to the side like this instead of straight in. But try to keep it really straight. It's gonna make it a lot easier than if you start with a big bit like this. It seems like it's gonna be faster, but it's probably not. And that's about it. Drill that mofo out, see what happens. So I finally, just last year, got a DeWalt drill, and man, it's worth every penny. If you can get a clean hole through the middle like that, it's gonna make your life a lot easier. If you start noticing you're drifting to the side, just come at it from that angle and recenter it, and it's gonna just keep your drill going and go back to the center. And then when you think you're back to the center, just straighten up again. And I got lucky with these. They're both real clean, and it's gonna make life a lot easier, just increasing sizes. And I think this probably about 1/4 inch what I end up with the hole. I'm not gonna do these yet since I don't have the part in. I'm just gonna pull the motor out and make sure the motor works, and maybe open it up and see if it's jacked up on the inside, because that's happened before too. Alright, so motor, cable, or the power to the motor, came here, unplugged it and shoved it through the hole. Took the window down. I'm not sure what the hell happened, but I can pull I got all this slack on the wire now. It looks totally jacked. The motor's still working, so I'm pretty convinced it's the regulator. Even so, I'm going to snip these wires and open up the motor just to make sure it's not all jacked up either. Alright, so here's a motor. Wasn't exactly sure where the regulator ended and the motor began. Took these 3 screws out like this. Set them aside. Started to pull the black part off, and I realized the metal part is also part of the regulator, so that comes off, which makes sense because that kind of holds the wire in there. I took it off, and actually I think this metal part is supposed to be in there, but anyway, it was kinked up real bad, so it was obviously that. I'm going to plug the motor in and make sure it works. And previously on my Mercury, I could hear the motor spinning, and it was actually the motor, and I don't remember how I probably just replaced the regulator even though it was actually the motor. And what had happened was you could take this part off, that black part, and there was a metal interior part and a metal exterior part where the worm gear went, and there were these 3 plastic spacers, and they had just disintegrated, and I guess they were supposed to add a little bit of cushion, and it was about a 15-year-old car, and those little spacers were just blown out. They each looked like about the end of my thumb from there on, and there were just little inserts between the 2 metal parts. And I sure as hell wasn't going to buy an $80 motor, so I just put some nuts in there, a stack of nuts in each 3 of those places, and it worked like magic. But this one looks like it actually, what the hell, let's see what happened. Now I'm 99% sure that this is part of the regulator, and it's going to come with the next one in the mail. Always save all your parts until the job is totally done, you're on the road, you've used it, and you're 100% sure. Alright, so that part was in there. Come on, son. That part was in there, and I think that was actually part of the regulator sticking out, but I'm going to save that. Unscrewed this thing, pulled it off, there's the worm gear. So basically the motor spins, this thing, that what looks like a screw right there just spins, and that's why it's a one-way thing. You know, this can turn this, but this cannot turn that. That's the beauty of a worm gear. And this does not have the spacers like I was talking about. It's just all one part. Well, can't really grab it, but oops. Anyway, so that's it. Got little teeth in it that fit on that screw, and that's all there is to it. Alright, another thing, you can see here's the part that holds the glass in. That's on that bar, that's the regulator. There's the glass, you can see that's riveted in. You're gonna have to drill those rivets out too. And they tend to make these ports like this that line up. There's one rivet, and you may or may not be able to see it, but there's the other one in there, so that you can do this job basically. And a lot of these holes are not just holes for no reason. That lines up, each of those lines up with one of the rivets that you're gonna have to drill out to get that glass out. Now getting the regulator out through here may be a real pain, and yeah, that's about it. Right, push the window all the way up, clamped it on my vice grips, and that's it for today. Gonna wait on the part. I screwed this one. I got off center. Now makes it hard to drill out through the middle, so I tried to put a little punch on there and pop that middle part through, but it didn't work. So I'm gonna try and grind it with the Dremel. I'm gonna try to pop it through now. Had to grind it some more. Now you can see what I mean by popping it through. And put a drill bit on that center circle and just whack it a few times, try to pop it out. Now we should be able to drill it. Had to regrind this one too, and it's really worth getting that first hole right. I should have used a punch, I now realize, to set that so the little tiny bit wouldn't have walked, because it's a pain to get to that one. Alright, so I pulled out my vice grips. Got the screws off up here. You can see those, sort of. Still tacked in down there. Trying to be real gentle. I'm either gonna pull these out because these screws are real long through the hole and it can't really back out. So I think I'm gonna have to take the glass off of this little part. Come on. So this part, this black part, rests in this, which is attached to the regulator. Black part's attached to the window, so or the glass. So I'm gonna have to pull it up and outside that little thing, basically pull it towards the outside, and then hopefully we can get the regulator out of there. Just as an aside, always make sure when you're drilling through there, you're not drilling through anything behind there, i.e. that your glass is raised up. Oh, you don't have to, I drill this last one out, I have to hold it with my other hand or something like that. The glass, that is. Alright, lesson learned. I should have left the screw in at the top. It kind of fell down, wasn't a big deal. But should have left the screw in at the top when I was undoing those last rivets. I pulled the glass up all the way now. Can't see it, but I'm holding it. And then I just kind of dropped the regulator down. And without getting it majorly caught in anything, I'm going to pull it out through this big old hole. A lot of times you can pull the glass out pretty easy and just get it out of the way. Makes it a little easier when you put it back in and just set it into the regulator, put the regulator in first. But this one, glass is not coming out, so we'll just try and get it in there. And this is just kind of where you got to figure it out. Get the thing in there and get it back on the little holder thing. Here's how it goes. So that would be inside the door, and then this is the thing. It goes up like that. Has a little guy around here on the other side that grabs onto that black part that's connected to the bottom of the glass. Sometimes that part that's connected to the glass is not connected to the glass very well, so be aware of that too. Make sure your new one looks like your old one before taking it out of the package, or you might not be able to send it back. Alright, looks like, so there's the 3 holes, and obviously top holes and bottom holes. So it looks like it's gonna go something like this. You have to bend back over on itself and go in the 3 holes like that. I forgot, it was a little while ago since I took this thing out. Now to hold the glass up, I stuck this in there. Probably ain't the best idea I ever had, but it works. Okay, these are the holes at the top that hold the top of the regulator in. Notice that they're forgiving. I don't know what you want to call that, but it's not a tight fit, so you got a little play in there. Before you pull the first one out, you should try to recognize or try to notice where that is, so that you can put the new one where the old one was, assuming that was a good idea. Assuming that it was in the right place. That went in really smoothly. I'm real surprised. This one's nice. It's got these little hooks on there that hold it in for just such an occasion. And now you're going to need a lot of screws and nuts of the bigger variety, and probably some Loctite for those nuts. And what was I going to say? Oh, possibly they're going to be short, because if they're too long, the window, when it comes down, it's going to catch on them down here. Probably not, I guess those aren't really going to matter, but these ones, that's where the glass is going to slide in and hook into that black thing that goes in there attached to the glass, and that's going to have to be pretty narrow. So either you're going to need some short screws, or you're going to need a Dremel to cut the screws to the perfect length. Alright, make sure to get that motor, get the power back out through there. I think the key is just keeping all that stuff loose. Keep these guys down here a little loose before you lower into the glass and get the glass attached to that regulator. And before you shut everything up, make sure you test it. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to test it without now, but I just feel like it might be a little bit weird without any load. Probably being paranoid, but we'll see. Anyway, everything tightened down. You're going to reuse your nuts that you pulled off originally. I'm just going to, whatever it's called, put some Loctite on these, tighten them down, probably cut them off with a Dremel, and I think I'm done. So I was going to use those little screws that are a little loose in here, but this motor sounds like it's kind of weak, and I would adjust it back and forth when I'm going up, and it's not the strongest motor ever. So I think if I use a little tighter fitting screw in there, it's going to make the motor a little happier. It basically seems to be getting caught like this, and then it kind of goes up and it doesn't like it. So if it keeps it straighter and maybe have the whole regulator a little bit more like that, seems like it might be a little happier. So hopefully the bigger screws will keep it in place. So before you close it up, well, I should have said this before you put the regulator in there. Maybe it's easier after, but put some lube on there, or spread around what lube there is. I got this stuff. Seems alright. Well, here's what it's doing. It goes down just fine. Hangs at the very last second. Hey, down's great. Up. Not so great. There's nothing in the way. It's just a matter of the window. If I pull it over to the left, it's a lot happier. Or if I push it on the right side. I've tweaked these back and forth some, but definitely make sure to test it before you put it away. I'm going to try to lube the things on the side. It's going to be a challenge, maybe with a Q-tip or something. If I could take the glass out, it'd be easier. But that sucks.